Her son stood in the doorway, gripping the trust papers like they were on fire. "You cut me and Kelsey out over a birthday card?" Evelyn didn't rise from her chair. "No, Greg. I cut my own son and daughter-in-law out because they threw a party for their dog on my 70th. She slid the notarized eviction across the desk, calm as glass. "This house raised you. It won't bury me." "Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." The balloons read, "Happy Bark Day." My name wasn't anywhere. Evelyn Marks awoke to the sound of helium squeaking against drywall. At first it sounded like laughter. Maybe her grandchildren had gotten up early to surprise her. That would have been sweet, expected even. She smoothed her robe, ran a hand over her silver bob, and took a breath, preparing herself for the smiles that might be waiting downstairs. Her hip ached, but it always did when it rained, and the clouds outside told her it would storm by nightfall. She padded down the stairs slowly. The smell of buttercream frosting met her halfway down. For a moment, her heart lifted. But when she turned the corner into the living room, her breath caught, not in joy, but confusion. The dining table was covered in bone-shaped sugar cookies and pink and gold confetti. A banner stretched from one window to the other, reading, "Happy Bark Day, Daisy." Daisy, the golden retriever, sat front and center on a plush dog bed, wearing a tiny sequined crown and a pastel tutu. She wagged her tail lazily as two toddlers, Kelsey's nieces, Evelyn realized, ran by wearing felt dog ears. Greg stood in the kitchen, spooning punch into a plastic bowl labeled, "Lap It Up." Kelsey posed by the marble island, adjusting a cake topped with a giant fondant paw print. Evelyn froze at the threshold, invisible. No one looked up. No one said her name. On the counter closest to the hallway, next to a pack of uninflated balloons and a roll of Scotch tape, sat a greeting card. The envelope said, "Mom," in blue ballpoint ink. She picked it up slowly, fingers trembling just a bit. Inside was a pre-printed message, "Hope you have a great birthday." Underneath a quick scrawl, "Happy 70. "We're busy today but love you. G+K." That was it. No hug, no gift, no mention, no candle. Just the dog. Just the hashtag Kelsey had already posted. # our fur. Baby turns 5. "Hi, Mom?" Greg finally noticed her. "We didn't wake you, did we?" "No," Evelyn said, her voice smooth. "Practiced. I slept fine. Hope that card made it to you," Kelsey added without turning around. "Things just got hectic." "Of course," Evelyn said. "You have a full house." She stood there a moment longer, watching her daughter-in-law light candles, not for her, but for a Labrador. The children barked in delight. One of them handed Daisy a squeaky toy wrapped in cellophane. Evelyn set the card back down without folding it. "I'm going to step out for a bit," she said. "Fresh air." Neither Greg nor Kelsey responded. Daisy barked once. That was louder than anything either of them had said to her. Upstairs, she changed into her walking shoes. The house used to feel like hers, warm with family, full of purpose, but now the walls echoed with someone else's rhythms, someone else's priorities. She didn't cry. She didn't slam any doors. She didn't even look in the mirror. That night, after the guests were gone, and no one asked her where she'd been, Evelyn took a bottle of red wine to the back patio and lit the fire pit. The logs caught quickly. She sat alone beneath the string lights she'd once installed herself, legs tucked beneath her in a worn blanket. The will was in her lap, folded 3 times. Her original living trust, names printed clearly. Greg, Camille, a generous clause for Kelsey. She fed the first page into the flames and watched it blacken, then the next, then the last. No drama, just clarity. When it was done, she returned inside, poured another half glass, and opened her laptop. Her fingers moved slowly across the keys. Draft, new living trust, no pets allowed. She clicked save and smiled, small but real. She opens her laptop and types, draft, new living trust, no pets allowed. Sometimes neglect isn't loud. Sometimes it's the absence of a second line in a birthday card. The next morning, the card was still there, propped up beside a canister of decaf and a half-open bag of dog treats. Evelyn stood in the kitchen robe-clad, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cool. She stared at it like it might change. Maybe she'd misread it the first time. Maybe there was a second sentence tucked beneath the flap. Maybe it had just been rushed, not thoughtless. She opened it again. The same hollow message stared back. Hope you have a great birthday. Happy 70! We're busy today but love you, G+K. She folded it shut and placed it gently, deliberately, into the compost bin. She moved through the house like a guest now. Every room had traces of someone else's taste. Kelsey's ceramic vases, Greg's smart home gadgets, toys for Camille that Evelyn wasn't allowed to discipline around. The fridge still had leftover cake, paw print intact. No one had offered her a slice. Upstairs, she opened the cedar chest at the foot of her bed and pulled out a weathered accordion folder. Inside, memories pressed between Manila and time, her marriage certificate, the deed to the house, her retirement payout summary, Camille's birth announcement, and her mother's wedding ring wrapped in a cotton square. Evelyn hadn't worn it in years, but she never considered it anyone else's to give. She began building a new folder, fresh, cream-colored, with a post-it on the front. 3 words, underlined twice. Legacy correction. At her desk, she opened her laptop and checked social media, not because she wanted to, but because she needed to see it for herself. There it was, Kelsey's post. A collage of photos, all beige and gold tones, soft focus filters, perfectly staged. Daisy in a crown, kids blowing kisses at the dog, the cake, the confetti, the party sign on the front porch, the hashtag read, #, our fur baby turns 5. Evelyn wasn't in a single photo, not even in the background. She remembered baking Camille's birthday cake by hand last year, after Kelsey's gluten-free vendor canceled. She'd watched their kids on short notice, on school holidays, when daycare was closed. She never asked for money. She brought gifts. She cleaned up. But when it came time for something that was hers, a milestone they'd known was coming, they'd tossed her a sentence and thrown a party for the dog. She didn't cry. Instead, she picked up her phone, opened her contacts, and scrolled down until she found the name, Simone Ellison, Esquire. Her estate lawyer, trust savvy, no nonsense. She sent a message. Hi Simone, I'd like to update my documents this week. I'm available Monday morning if you are. Then she returned to her documents, began scanning them one at a time into a fresh digital folder, the deed, the trust copy, the account summaries from her retirement accounts, even her burial preferences. She slipped her mother's ring into a small padded pouch and zipped it into the folder. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't grief. It was arithmetic. What was given? What was forgotten? What could be reclaimed? Later that afternoon, she sat on the front porch with a blanket draped across her knees, watching a squirrel dart across the lawn. She felt the weight of the silence differently now. Not heavy, just honest. Her phone buzzed. Voicemail. Greg. She didn't answer, but she listened. Hey, Mom. Sorry we missed hanging out. Kelsey's family came over instead. It was just a lot. Hope you had a good day, though. We'll do something soon. He didn't say happy birthday. Not this time. Evelyn sat back in the rocker and closed her eyes. Soon had been the promise for years. She was finished waiting for it. Greg leaves a voicemail. Sorry we missed hanging out. Kelsey's family came over instead. They hosted a party for a Labrador. They couldn't find time for the woman who raised one of them. On Sunday morning, the pink and gold streamers were still taped to the banister. Evelyn moved through the house before anyone else had gotten up, her footsteps soft on the hardwood. The quiet made everything louder. Daisy's snoring from the laundry room, the blinking light on the dishwasher, the weight of her own breath. She opened the hallway closet and retrieved a small plastic storage tub, the one she'd used for keepsakes before the kids moved in. Inside were things she hadn't looked at in years. A pressed corsage from her 40th anniversary, Greg's first report card, Camille's finger paintings. She didn't cry. Not this time. She just started sorting. The shelf above the fireplace had once held Evelyn's wedding photo, a pewter-framed snapshot of her and her late husband cutting a cake, laughing mid-blink. That photo now lived in a drawer, replaced by a mason jar of twinkle lights and a wooden sign that read, "Live, Bark, Love." She removed the sign first, set it in the storage tub, then the scented candle, then the framed photo of Daisy dressed as a pumpkin last Halloween. She wasn't being petty, she was reclaiming square inches, and square inches added up. Later that afternoon, Evelyn took out a yellow notepad and sat at the kitchen table. She started writing down every item in the house she'd paid for: furniture, appliances, renovations, even the new HVAC system she'd financed when Greg said money was tight during lockdown. It was a long list, and it was her list. Greg had moved in with his family during the first year of COVID, just for a few months until things stabilize. 3 years later, they were still stabilizing. That night, after dinner, Evelyn sat in her room and reread Simone's reply. "Let's meet Monday morning. I've cleared my 9:30 for you." It felt like an opening bell. Monday came. Evelyn dressed in gray, slacks, a navy cardigan, and the necklace her mother had left her. Turquoise in a silver setting, understated but solid. She took her old leather folder and drove to Simone's office, a low-rise building tucked behind a pharmacy and a dentist's clinic. Simone greeted her with a warm smile and a legal pad already open. "I want my next birthday," Evelyn said without waiting to be asked, "to feel like freedom." Simone didn't blink. "Let's build it." They began with the house. Evelyn wanted it moved into a new, irrevocable trust, one where control didn't pass through bloodlines, but through behavior. They discussed inheritance triggers, conduct clauses, and the tax impact of conditional disbursements. By the end of the meeting, Evelyn had a timeline, a folder of drafts, and a separate small key in her pocket, one for the private P.O. box Simone had suggested. Just for legal correspondence, just hers. "Clean lines," Simone said. "No confusion." On Tuesday, Evelyn brought home 3 banker's boxes from the office supply store. She started packing quietly, only a few things at a time. Her mother's quilt, a box of Christmas ornaments, a silver serving tray engraved with the year Greg was born. She labeled each with a black Sharpie in her clean, neat handwriting. Post-party life. Office, final. Trust essentials. On Thursday evening, they sat down to dinner. Pasta, salad, garlic knots from the freezer. Camille asked if she could give Daisy another biscuit. Kelsey said yes, without looking up. "I was thinking," Kelsey said between bites, "when you pass, we'll probably Airbnb this place. Location's great. People would pay a fortune for walking distance to the market." Evelyn didn't flinch. She cut her salad cleanly, chewed, swallowed, and placed her fork down with care. "Would they?" she said softly. Not quite a question. No one answered. But something in her posture shifted. A hinge had turned. Kelsey casually mentions at dinner, "When you pass, we'll probably Airbnb this place. Location's great." They already planned the listing. I hadn't even finished my soup. Evelyn didn't respond that night. Not to the comment. Not to the assumption. She simply cleared her plate after dinner, thanked no one in particular, and carried her dishes to the sink like muscle memory. The words still hung in the air behind her. Airbnb this place when you pass. Like she was a placeholder. Like she was already gone. In her bedroom, she changed into her soft cotton pajamas, the ones Greg used to call retirement chic. She sat at the edge of her bed and picked up her phone. Simone answered on the second ring. "They're speaking like I'm the past tense," Evelyn said, calm but cold. "Let's accelerate the transfer. Title first." Simone didn't ask questions. She just said, "I'll start the paperwork tonight. We'll file it under the irrevocable trust. You'll retain lifetime occupancy and full authority." Evelyn leaned back against the headboard, exhaled. "And I want a clause." "What kind?" "A boundary clause. If anyone occupying this property demonstrates conduct inconsistent with familial care." She paused, letting the phrase take shape. "They forfeit their right to remain." There was silence on the line. Then Simone replied, "Occupants who display non-familial conduct may be removed with 30 days' notice, legal and enforceable." Evelyn nodded to herself. "Good. Send it." She hung up, placed her phone on the nightstand and stared up at the ceiling fan, letting the blades hum her into stillness. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt intact. The next day, she took the bus to the storage facility near the post office. She had signed the lease for a small, climate-controlled unit, just enough space for what she intended to keep. She brought 3 more banker's boxes this time: her wedding album, her father's pocket watch, the silver locket Greg had once bought her in high school with his summer job money, back when he still believed in giving without a receipt. She labeled each box neatly in the same Sharpie from the week before. Post-party life, 2 heirlooms, final. No pets allowed. Back home, the walls looked a little barer. No one noticed. Greg had meetings. Kelsey was testing out new turmeric recipes for her wellness blog. Camille had started walking around the house saying namaste without knowing what it meant. Evelyn watched them like a woman watching someone else's documentary. That evening, she received the finalized title documents by email. The house had officially moved into the Evelyn Marks Living Trust. Protected, clear, irrevocable. She printed 2 copies. One went into her folder, the other she slid into a file labeled Exit Strategy, which she tucked into a box at the back of her closet. Later that night, she made herself a small bowl of lentil soup and took it out to the back patio. The string lights still worked. The sky was starting to hint at fall. She didn't touch her phone until it buzzed twice against the arm of the chair. A message from Greg. "Can you dog sit next weekend? We're heading to the resort. Would mean a lot." She stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering. She didn't reply. Not yet. Greg messages. "Can you dog sit next weekend? We're heading to a resort. They left me behind on my birthday. I left them off my deed." The next morning, Evelyn took her tea on the back steps. No mug that said, "World's Best Mom." Just plain white porcelain, chipped slightly at the rim. The dew hadn't burned off yet, and the quiet wrapped around her like something earned. She opened Greg's message again, read it one last time. "Can you dog sit next weekend? We're heading to the resort. Would mean a lot." She tapped out her reply without hesitation. "Unfortunately, I won't be available. Please make other plans." She didn't say why. She didn't offer suggestions. She didn't soften. The response came quickly. "Are you okay? You're acting different." She stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed, "I'm acting accordingly." And that was that. 2 hours later, Simone emailed confirmation that the trust restructuring had fully executed. The house, the land it stood on, and every right of claim now belonged to the Evelyn Marks Living Trust, irrevocable, insulated, sealed. Greg and Kelsey's names were nowhere on it, not as co-owners, not as trustees, not as beneficiaries, just absent. Evelyn read the documents in full, her eyes moving steadily down the pages. When she reached the signature line, she signed in bold black ink and whispered something aloud, not for anyone else but for herself. Clean break. Then she gathered her purse and headed to the UPS store to meet the notary. It was a tidy errand. 1 hour, 2 forms, 1 new clause. The legal language was precise. In the event of recurring disrespectful conduct by any presumptive heir, the trustee reserves the right to terminate all inheritance claims immediately and without appeal. Simone had asked, "Do you want that clause in the public or private file?" Evelyn answered without pause. "Both." That afternoon, she began moving her secondary accounts, investment funds, her long-term CD, the payout from her pension, into a new bank she'd selected weeks ago. One with no shared logins, one that didn't send paper mail unless she asked. By sundown, every dollar of personal liquidity was under her control. Greg and Kelsey weren't removed from her finances. They were never invited. Later that night, she poured herself a glass of rosé and opened a new browser tab. The ocean liner website took a moment to load, but when it did, she scrolled with quiet deliberation. Alaska, Glacier Bay, 7 days, solo suite, balcony view. She clicked Book Now. When the confirmation number flashed across the screen, she exhaled like someone stepping off a tightrope. It would be her 71st birthday, her first one away, her first one for herself. The irony didn't escape her. They'd asked her to dog sit for a vacation, so she booked one of her own, with no leash in sight. At midnight, she carried her legal folder upstairs, tucked it behind a row of hardcovers on the top shelf. Then she sat in her reading chair and looked around the room, her room, with its soft lamplight, its silence, its sense of full reclamation. She was about to stand when she noticed the envelope on her side table. Not new. Not something she remembered placing. It had been slipped under her door sometime that evening. The handwriting on the front stopped her cold. Allison? Her niece? Her brother's daughter? Estranged since the family estate fight after Evelyn's mother passed. They hadn't spoken in over a decade. She opened the card slowly. Inside was a delicate watercolor of peach blossoms, and below it, a handwritten message. "Dear Aunt Evelyn, I know this is late, but I didn't want the day to pass without saying, I remember. Happy birthday. I hope you're still drinking peach tea. Love." Allison Evelyn didn't smile. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself feel the weight of being remembered. Evelyn receives an unexpected birthday card, late, from her estranged niece, Allison. She remembered I loved peach tea. They forgot I was even turning 70. The card sat on Evelyn's desk for 2 full days before she allowed herself to read it again. Not because she was avoiding it, because she wasn't ready for what it stirred. That fragile peach blossom print, the lilt of Allison's penmanship, curved but certain. The simple, unsentimental memory. Hope you're still drinking peach tea. It was the smallest thing. But small things, Evelyn knew, were never small. Not when it came to being seen. She closed the door and let the kettle boil. Chose her oldest mug, the one from Savannah, from the summer she and her brother had taken the girls down to the coast. Allison had been 6. A glittery sticker of a seahorse still clung to the bottom of the mug, dulled by time. She poured the water, let the steam rise, sat down, and cried. Not loudly, not theatrically, just tears, the kind that feel like they've been holding court in your ribcage for months, waiting for release. When she could breathe again, she opened her laptop. To allison.m.hartwell@gmail.com. Subject, your card. Dear Allison, I got your letter. I want you to know it reached me, not just the paper, the memory, the care. If you'd like to reconnect, I'd be open to lunch. Maybe something simple. I'm not far from the old library, if you remember it. Warmly, Evelyn. She debated signing it Aunt Evelyn, but chose not to. She didn't want to assert title. She wanted to offer presence. The reply came less than an hour later. I'd love to. I was afraid I'd waited too long. They met the following Wednesday, at a cafe with wide windows and second-hand chairs that didn't match. Allison arrived early, still with that nervous energy Evelyn remembered from childhood. Dark hair now in a soft pixie cut, glasses, jeans without irony. She looked older, but not hardened. I wasn't sure if I should hug you, she said, when Evelyn stepped inside. Evelyn took her hand. Let's just sit. They talked slowly at first, mostly about neutral things. How her father was. Allison didn't say much, just enough to imply distance. Evelyn didn't press. She spoke about her own garden, how she hadn't traveled in years, though she was planning a trip. Alone, she added, without explanation. Midway through her chai, Allison cleared her throat. I've always wanted to reach out, she said, but after what happened with the estate, I wasn't sure I was welcome. Evelyn stirred her tea once, then set the spoon down. She didn't blink. You are now. That was all she needed to say. Later that afternoon, she logged into her estate portal, opened the section labeled Contingent Beneficiaries. She added a name, Allison Hartwell Percentage, to be determined upon review. She didn't make it a grand gesture, just a beginning. The house was already spoken for. But legacy, Evelyn had come to believe, wasn't just land and bank accounts. It was the act of remembering. It was a letter in the mail, a cup of peach tea, a name on the page that hadn't been there before. She printed out a new provisional addendum and placed it in her legacy correction folder. That evening, as she settled into the armchair in her bedroom, she opened her phone. Mindlessly, almost, but the algorithm served it up like it always did. Kelsey's post, a flat lay of pumpkins, a bouquet of eucalyptus, and a caption in her signature lowercase aesthetic. Looking at venues thinking we'll host Thanksgiving here this year. Evelyn stared at the screen. The glow illuminated the creases in her palm as she held the phone still. She didn't comment. She didn't like it. She just locked the screen, leaned back, and let the quiet settle again. Kelsey posts, "Looking at venues, thinking we'll host Thanksgiving here this year. They assumed I'd cook again. This time I'd already booked a table." The next morning, Evelyn opened her laptop and clicked into her browser's bookmarks. She found the link without searching. She'd saved it 2 years ago after a quiet afternoon wine tasting when the vineyard manager had told her they offered holiday prix-fixe dinners for guests who prefer ease over obligation. She had nodded politely back then, never thinking she'd need it. Now she clicked Reserve. Thanksgiving Day. 3 p.m. Table for 3. Guests: Evelyn Marks, Janice Freeman, Allison Hartwell. She didn't ask either of them. She just sent a text afterward. "I've made a reservation. If you're free, I'd love to share the afternoon. No pressure, no turkey prep, just a table with my name on it." Allison replied first. "I wouldn't miss it." Then Janice. "Finally, a holiday that doesn't ask me to baste something." Evelyn smiled, folded her planner shut. She didn't feel rebellious. She felt aligned. That evening, while unloading groceries, Kelsey asked over her shoulder, "So what should we do about the meal? You want me to grab your usual cranberry stuff from Whole Foods?" Evelyn didn't look up from the produce drawer. "I won't be available." There was a pause. Kelsey straightened from where she was peeling the film off a pre-packed salad. "What do you mean?" "I'll be out of town," Evelyn said evenly. "I made other plans." Kelsey gave a short, confused laugh. "But you always cook." Evelyn closed the fridge slowly. Family doesn't make someone feel forgotten. She didn't wait for a response, just walked upstairs, the sound of her own footsteps enough to anchor the silence that followed. 2 days before Thanksgiving, Evelyn packed a small overnight bag. 3 changes of clothes, a cashmere wrap, the bracelet Janice had given her years ago, a silver band etched with the word "still." She clipped her pearl earrings to the inside pocket and zipped everything closed. On the kitchen table, beside the fruit bowl no one refilled anymore, she left a note that said only, "Gone to breathe. Please feed Daisy." She met Allison at the train station just before noon. Janice pulled up 10 minutes later in a cranberry-colored sedan, her scarf matching the car like she'd planned it. She hadn't. They drove north with the windows cracked, fall wind brushing their hair back. No radio, no traffic, no expectations. That evening, in the inn just outside the vineyard, Allison handed Evelyn a small gift bag. No ribbon, no tissue paper. Inside, a folded travel blanket, deep green. Soft enough to sleep under, sturdy enough to take anywhere. "For the cruise," Allison said. Evelyn touched the fabric with quiet hands. "It's perfect." Back home, before she left, Evelyn had made one more entry in her trust portal. This time, it was official, not provisional. Beneficiary: Allison Hartwell. Percentage: 20% discretionary legacy clause. She printed the amendment and slipped it into the folder labeled Legacy Correction. It sat between the deed and the letter of burial wishes. She hadn't told Allison yet. She wanted to give it time to mean something. Thanksgiving afternoon arrived like a hush. The vineyard was golden with afternoon light. The food was warm, plated like art, and utterly beside the point. They toasted with sparkling cider and didn't talk about what was missing, just what was present. After dessert, Evelyn stepped outside for a moment, watching a hawk glide overhead against a sky the color of pressed linen. She felt full, not from the meal, but from the absence of needing to perform gratitude. That evening, as they returned to the inn, her phone buzzed twice. Voicemail. She played it in the hallway outside her room. "Greg, you left? Without even saying goodbye?" His voice held more disbelief than anger, like he'd just realized something had changed and couldn't understand when. Evelyn stared at the phone, then at the hallway mirror. Her own reflection didn't blink. She slipped the phone into her purse and stepped inside. Greg calls. "You left? Without even saying goodbye?" He didn't see the irony. "He left me on my birthday." Evelyn returned home 2 days after Thanksgiving. She let herself in with her own key, the suitcase wheels soft against the foyer tile, her travel wrap still tucked around her shoulders. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and whatever scent Kelsey's latest plug-in diffuser insisted on labeling hearth. The silence was familiar now. She placed her keys in the ceramic dish she'd made in a pottery class during her divorce. Back then, she thought the cracks in the glaze made it imperfect. Now she thought they made it hers. She unpacked slowly, methodically, as if to reclaim each drawer one folded item at a time. When she reached her nightstand, she paused, then played the voicemail again. "You left? Without even saying goodbye?" His voice wasn't sharp, just bewildered. So she called him back. He answered on the second ring. "Mom? I left," she said calmly, "because I've been gone to you for a while now." There was a long silence. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Greg waited, but Evelyn let the quiet stretch. Some explanations aren't owed. Some truths don't need rehearsing. "I didn't know you felt this way," he said eventually, his voice lower. "I know," she replied. "That's the point." She ended the call before it wandered into apologies that weren't rooted in change. Later that evening, Evelyn entered her bedroom and froze. The side table had been moved. Her jewelry box, closed, but not quite where she'd left it. A few books stacked in a different order. The mirror tilted. She stepped back out and called down the stairs. "Greg?" Kelsey answered instead. "Oh, hey, I was just organizing up there. Needed a little more space while we rearranged Camille's closet. Didn't think you'd mind." Evelyn didn't respond. She walked back in, shut the door behind her, and turned the lock. That night, she slept with the bedside lamp on. The next morning, she ordered a set of indoor security cameras. Discreet, motion-triggered, synced to her phone. After the package confirmation arrived, she sat down at her desk and opened her email. To Simone at ellisonlawgroup.com. Subject: Contingency. Simone, let's move forward with the backup plan. All documentation should be ready by month's end. Begin preliminary eviction prep if needed. Best, Evelyn. She hit send, then pulled out the thick file labeled Legacy Correction and added a printed copy of the email to the growing stack. Later that afternoon, as she walked to retrieve her mail, Mrs. Adler from next door waved from her porch. Evelyn waved back, but something in the neighbor's face made her pause. "Can I ask something?" Mrs. Adler called. She was in her garden gloves, kneeling by a dormant rosemary bush. "Of course," Evelyn replied. Mrs. Adler stood, dusting her knees. "I overheard them talking last week, Greg and your daughter-in-law. Something about refinancing. They mentioned your name, said they were thinking of applying in your stead just to see if they could qualify. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I just thought you should know." Evelyn blinked. "Thank you." She didn't ask anything else, didn't show a flicker of surprise. Instead, she turned, walked back inside, and bolted the front door behind her. The neighbor, Mrs. Adler, warns Evelyn, "They were talking about refinancing in your name. They were planning to borrow against the home. Too bad I'd already locked it down." Evelyn didn't react right away. She went inside, set the mail on the counter, and poured herself a half glass of ginger ale, flat from the bottle, just enough to keep her hands busy. She carried it to the dining table and opened her file drawer with slow precision. She already knew what she'd find. She wanted to feel it in her fingers. The title lock confirmation was printed in thick, legal-weight stock. She ran her thumb along the edge before scanning it into a fresh email draft. To Home Secure Title Services, CC. Simone at ellisonlawgroup.com. Subject: Cease authorization. Notice, dear team, please ensure no third-party pre-qualification or refinance applications are processed under my property title without written, notarized approval. This includes family members. Attached, irrevocable trust certification and title lock confirmation. Sincerely, Evelyn Marks. She attached both PDFs and hit send. Then she waited. Not 2 days later, Simone forwarded her an alert. Attempted lender contact on the property. Denied. Flagged. Documented. Greg's name was on the inquiry. Pre-qualification. Denied immediately. Evelyn didn't forward the email. She didn't call. She didn't make a scene. She printed it. That afternoon, she visited the county clerk's office, walked in with a fresh blouse and the poise of someone who knew her rights. "I'd like to file a boundary encroachment complaint," she told the receptionist. "Internal domestic dispute. Property is protected, but the threat is informal, for now." The clerk didn't blink. She handed Evelyn a form. Within 20 minutes, the paperwork was filed, a soft legal barrier placed around the one thing Evelyn had left untouched for too long: her peace. 2 nights later, Kelsey found her in the laundry room folding towels. "You're sabotaging your own family," she said, arms crossed over a bralette and yoga pants. "All this lawyer stuff, the cameras, the locking of doors, it's obsessive." Evelyn didn't look up. She finished folding the last towel, set it on the stack, and turned slowly. "No," she said, "I'm protecting this house from becoming a kennel." Kelsey flushed, first with confusion, then insult. "What does that mean?" "It means," Evelyn said, voice unchanging, "that no one treats something like home when they think it's a hotel." She didn't raise her voice, didn't wait for Kelsey's retort. She walked out of the laundry room, her slippers making no sound on the tile. That weekend, Simone came by the house with a hard copy of the final amendment to the trust. Greg Marks removed Kelsey Marks, removed distribution reallocation. 40%, Women's Legal Fund, nonprofit. 30%, Janice Freeman, friend caregiver designation. 30%, Allison Hartwell, contingent heir, rising percentage clause. Evelyn signed without fanfare. Just a nod, just ink. She slipped the updated trust into a new folder labeled Final Draft, Executed. That evening, she updated her passwords, changed her online banking profile image, called her cruise concierge, and upgraded to the stateroom with the private balcony. It was not about being vengeful. It was about making it real. Late that night, the house was still. Camille had fallen asleep in the living room under a pile of blankets. Evelyn padded into the kitchen for a glass of water, the quiet broken only by the low hum of the fridge. As she walked back toward the stairs, she paused. The door to her study was open. She'd left it closed. Inside, Greg stood by her desk. In his hand was the printed copy of the updated trust, the one she had intended to store away in the morning. He looked up at her, eyes wide, jaw slack. "What is this?" he asked, voice brittle. Evelyn didn't blink. She just stood in the doorway, the hallway light behind her casting her shadow long across the carpet. Greg finds the updated will on Evelyn's desk, accidentally. He read the truth, and still didn't recognize the mirror. Evelyn stood in the doorway of her study, her fingers still damp from the chilled glass of water she had left on the kitchen counter. Greg turned slowly toward her, the pages of the updated trust hanging loosely in his hand, as though they had scalded him but he couldn't put them down. The look on his face wasn't simple anger. It was betrayal laced with disbelief. He stared at the paper, then back at her, as if trying to reconcile what he had just read with the woman standing in front of him. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She had nothing left to explain, and even less to defend. "I don't understand," he said finally. "What is this?" Evelyn stepped into the room, calm and even. "It's the truth," she said. "On paper. That's all." Greg's mouth opened slightly like he expected more. An excuse, an apology, maybe even a lie he could accept. But nothing came. This cuts us out of everything." "It doesn't cut you out," Evelyn replied, moving to the edge of her desk and gently taking the pages from his hand. "It corrects the story you kept telling yourselves." He shook his head, frustrated. "But we're your kids. Me, Camille, Kelsey." "You're not kids anymore," she interrupted. "You're adults. Grown adults who treated me like I was part of the furniture. Something inherited, not someone included." Greg's voice cracked, louder now. "So this is revenge?" Evelyn looked at him with a gaze sharpened by years of silence. It's revision. I'm rewriting a version of my life that no longer requires me to be erased in order for you to feel comfortable." Before Greg could respond, they both heard footsteps in the hallway. Kelsey appeared in the doorway, already tense. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing at the documents now folded on the desk. Greg turned to her, hands tight at his sides. "She changed everything. She's leaving us nothing." Kelsey's mouth flattened. "Seriously, Evelyn? This house was supposed to stay in the family." Evelyn turned toward her slowly. "It will stay where the family is." Kelsey blinked. We are the family. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a plain envelope. From inside, she withdrew a single page. Crisp, notarized, dated. She handed it across the desk to Greg. "What's this?" he asked, hesitant. 60 days, she said. "You have 60 days to vacate. I suggest you use them wisely." Kelsey scoffed. "You're evicting us?" Evelyn didn't raise her voice. "You moved in with the promise of care. You stayed out of convenience. There's a difference." Greg stepped forward, eyes wide, disbelief turning to desperation. "Where are we even supposed to go?" "You're both employed," she said. "You'll figure it out." Kelsey's tone shifted, the way it always did when she thought manipulation might work better than confrontation. "Think about Camille. She loves you." Evelyn's expression didn't change. "I hope she remembers me as someone who didn't model being walked over." The room fell into a tense, vibrating silence. Then Greg moved toward the stack of mail Evelyn had sorted earlier and picked up something from the top. A card, dog-eared, barely sealed. He recognized it instantly. It was the birthday card they had left on the kitchen counter, the one addressed simply to Mom. He held it up like a weapon. "You burned everything over that?" Evelyn stepped toward him, her voice quiet but unwavering. "I didn't burn it over the card. I burned it over the years written in invisible ink. The ones where I wasn't seen, where everything I gave was assumed to be owed." Greg looked down at the card, and for a moment she thought she saw something flicker across his face. Maybe recognition, maybe regret, but it passed too quickly to land. Evelyn turned away. She picked up the trust folder and slid it into her desk drawer with the finality of a chapter closing. She didn't need to raise her voice to make her boundaries heard. Greg placed the card on the desk and left the room without another word. Evelyn stayed behind, letting the weight of the silence settle again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was earned. Greg throws down the card they left on her birthday. "You burned everything over that?" It wasn't the card. It was the years written in invisible ink. Evelyn didn't sleep that night, but she didn't lie awake either. She just existed in the stillness of her room, back propped against the pillows, her bedside lamp casting a gentle amber glow across the dresser she had once refinished with her husband, back when love had texture and time. The house was quiet, almost reverent in its silence, but she could hear movement now and then from the guest room down the hall, the soft thump of a drawer closing too hard, the heavy pause of footsteps that didn't know where to land. It was nearly sunrise when she heard the creak of the staircase. She had just brewed her first cup of tea, nothing fancy, just black with a splash of milk, the way her mother drank it, and was standing at the window when Greg stepped into the kitchen. His hair was unbrushed, his face drawn, and he didn't speak until he realized she had no intention of breaking the silence first. "I didn't mean for it to feel like this," he said, voice low and sanded at the edges. "This wasn't what we wanted." Evelyn stirred her tea once, gently, then set the spoon down and turned toward him with the kind of composure only grief or clarity can teach. "No one means to," she said, "but it happens just the same." He ran a hand over his face. "I don't understand why it's gotten this far." Evelyn folded her arms, not coldly, but with the quiet fortitude of someone who had spent years waiting for this exact conversation. She didn't speak in anger. She spoke in record. "For 10 years you made small decisions that told me exactly where I stood," she said. "You missed my anniversary dinner, twice, because Kelsey's parents were in town. You forgot my checkup when I was screened for arrhythmia, even though I left the reminder on the fridge. You left me off your daughter's emergency contact list, but remembered to include Daisy's vet." Greg opened his mouth, but Evelyn didn't give him space to interrupt. "When Camille turned 3, I spent 2 days baking that elaborate rainbow cake because the bakery canceled. I remember standing in your kitchen, sweating, tired, and watching you hand it to your guests like it had appeared by magic. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Just cake." He lowered his eyes, but she kept going, not out of cruelty, but because the silence between them had grown roots. She was cutting through them now. "You say you don't know how it got this far, but I do. It got this far because you stopped treating me like a person. You made me a background character in your life, a resource, a safety net, a babysitter. Never a mother, certainly not a woman. Greg's shoulders slumped. I didn't realize. She inhaled through her nose, long and slow. That's the point. You didn't realize, because realizing would have required looking. He was quiet for a moment, the words absorbing in the space between them like water into dry soil. Then he finally asked, not with malice but genuine confusion, "So what now? You're cutting us out forever?" Evelyn stepped closer, not confrontational, but steady. "I'm not cutting anyone out," she said. "I'm stepping out of a story that was never written with me in mind." He blinked, trying to process the words. "We're still your family." She nodded slowly. "And I'll always care for you. But family isn't a title you get to keep when your behavior contradicts the meaning of the word." He looked down at the table where she had laid the morning mail. His eyes caught on a card, slightly crumpled, the same one he had thrown down in her office the night before. It was still there. He picked it up like it weighed something. "You burned everything over this?" Evelyn took a moment before she answered. "No," she said, her voice softer now but resolute. "I burned it over everything that came before it. Over the years written in invisible ink, over the birthdays spent in silence, the gratitude that never arrived, the comfort you took for granted." Greg's eyes flicked up, and for the first time in a long time, she saw something real flash behind them. It wasn't full recognition, but it was a crack in the surface. She didn't press it. She let it be. That evening, after he left the house to take Camille to dance class, Evelyn returned to her study and opened the estate planning portal. In the burial directive section, she clicked Edit. She removed the placeholder paragraph that mentioned family remembrances and replaced it with something else, something truer. No speeches from relatives who forgot I existed while I was alive, readings by those who showed up, live music, nothing somber, just sound that moves and breathes. She saved the document, printed a hard copy, and placed it in her Legacy Correction folder behind the trust amendment. As she was folding the folder closed, her phone buzzed softly on the desk. A message from Allison. "I have a surprise for you." Evelyn smiled faintly, then closed the folder. Some surprises were worth waiting for. Allison texts. "I have a surprise for you." She gave me what I hadn't seen in decades, presents without condition. Allison arrived on a Sunday morning, early enough that the sunlight hadn't yet touched the front porch, just the edges of Evelyn's shutters. She knocked gently, 3 quiet taps, not the kind meant to declare, just to ask permission. Evelyn opened the door, still holding her teacup. She was barefoot, cardigan looped over one shoulder, her hair loosely pinned. There was something unguarded in her face when she saw her niece again, something that softened before she had time to brace it. Allison smiled, lifting a small canvas tote with a faded library logo on the front. "I brought something." She followed Evelyn inside, setting the tote on the dining table without ceremony. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper, like things had been touched gently, not scrubbed into forgetting. Evelyn motioned toward the table. "Go on." Allison unzipped the bag and pulled out a thick scrapbook, bound in faded navy cloth, corners worn like a memory passed between hands too many times. She opened it to the first page, then slid it across. Evelyn sat down slowly. Her fingers brushed the edge before turning the page. There were photos of her kitchen, 20 years younger, aprons dusted in flour, little hands reaching for cooling racks. A shot of Evelyn beside a campfire, holding 2 mugs in mittened hands, smiling wide at something beyond the frame. There was a note card from a lunch she'd packed, Allison's 3rd-grade field trip, in handwriting unmistakably hers. "Don't forget to look at the stars. They'll remind you of your place." Page after page, each one stitched with a quiet sort of reverence. "I've been collecting these since college," Allison said softly. "You always said the little things mattered." Evelyn didn't answer right away. Her hand rested on a page with a wrinkled recipe card taped gently in place. Butter sugar cookies, EM's version, less salt, more love. Her throat tightened. The tears came without announcement. It was only the 2nd time she'd cried since the dog party. This time, they didn't sting. They released. She reached across the table and took Allison's hand. "You kept all this?" "I kept what mattered." They sat in stillness for a while, letting the moment settle like the dust that only appears in late morning light. When Evelyn stood, she didn't say a word. She walked into her bedroom and opened the drawer beneath her jewelry box. Inside was a locket, oval, brushed silver, delicate and worn at the clasp. It had been meant for Camille once, years ago, back when Evelyn still believed that legacy flowed along the lines of blood alone, but now it sat in her palm like something redefined. She returned and placed it in Allison's hand. "I always thought this belonged to someone who knew how to remember." Allison didn't speak. She simply held the locket, thumb brushing over the surface like it was something sacred. That evening, Evelyn sat at her desk and opened the estate planning portal once again. She clicked into the section marked Letters of Legacy and began drafting a new one. Not formal, not polished, just true. "You remembered me. So I remembered you." She uploaded the file and saved it under Allison's record. Then she reached into her filing cabinet and placed a printed copy into the Legacy Correction folder, sliding it behind the notarized trust and her revised burial request. The drawer closed with the kind of satisfaction that didn't need to be declared. After Allison left, Evelyn returned to the scrapbook and turned a few pages more. Near the back was a photograph she didn't remember being taken. She was seated on the porch in a folding chair, reading a book while Allison, no more than 10, colored beside her on the steps. Taped beneath the photo was a small card. "To the woman who made ordinary days feel worth saving." Evelyn touched the corner of the page, then slowly shut the book. She didn't hear the door open behind her. She heard the slam. Kelsey stood in the doorway of the study, red-faced, a crumpled paper clutched in her hand. It looked like it had been pulled from a printer tray in haste. Her mouth opened before Evelyn could speak. "I hope you're ready," she said, slamming the page onto the desk. "Because if you think you can disinherit us without consequences, you've got another thing coming." Evelyn looked at the paper. Legal letterhead. A threat. Not from a place of power, but from panic. She didn't rise. She didn't reply. She just reached for her glasses. Kelsey slams a lawsuit threat on the counter. They finally responded, but only after they were removed. The paper Kelsey slammed onto Evelyn's desk wasn't an official lawsuit. It was a printed PDF from a legal template site, badly formatted, full of buzzwords. Intentional emotional distress. Housing exploitation. Fraudulent coercion. It read like someone had typed "how to sue your mother-in-law" into a search bar and printed the first result. Kelsey stood there like it was a sword. Evelyn simply adjusted her glasses. "I see," she said, lifting the page with care, as if not to smudge whatever dignity might still cling to it. "I'll forward this to my attorney." Kelsey scoffed. "You think you can just erase us?" Evelyn looked at her flatly. "You already erased me. This is just me acknowledging it." The next morning, Simone met Evelyn at her favorite cafe. No briefcase, no panic. Just her tablet and a soft smile. She sipped her espresso before taking the printed threat from Evelyn's hand. "This isn't worth the toner it cost to print it," Simone said calmly. "They'd have to prove coercion. You're of sound mind, financially independent, and we've documented every update with timestamps and third-party witnesses. You're untouchable now." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Good. Then let's end it." Simone nodded and tapped her screen. "I'll file a cease harassment order by this afternoon. It won't escalate beyond this." True to her word, by evening, Evelyn received confirmation that a formal notice had been issued. Any further communication from Greg or Kelsey, verbal or written, would be legally filtered through counsel. Evelyn printed the email and slid it into her Legacy Correction folder behind the last trust update. 3 days later, her phone buzzed with a final message from Greg. No voicemail, no subject line. "You win. We're gone. No apology. Just retreat. Cowardice. Dressed as surrender." She didn't reply. That weekend, Evelyn changed the locks, not out of fear, out of finality. The locksmith arrived at 10 a.m., and by noon, the house sighed like something exhaled. She walked through it with a new set of keys and the quiet that had always belonged to her, even when she wasn't allowed to claim it. On Sunday, Janice brought over a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne and a camera with a real shutter. Allison arrived with paper flowers she'd made by hand, tucked into a mason jar Evelyn had once used for peach jam. They took a photo on the front porch. Janice in a long scarf, Allison in denim, Evelyn in her navy cardigan with the gold buttons that used to be for holidays only. No balloons, no fuss. Just the three of them. Sunlight, bare, and honest. That evening, Evelyn posted it quietly to her rarely used social media account. No hashtags, no filters, just a caption. Finally celebrating 70 the way I wanted. The post got 7 likes. 2 comments, 1 private message from a woman she hadn't seen since water aerobics in 2004, thanking her for reminding me it's never too late to draw a line in permanent ink. Evelyn closed her laptop and walked to the kitchen, humming. The cupboard still bore signs of others, mismatched mugs, a turmeric-stained spoon, but the space had begun to feel like her own again. She poured herself a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching dusk creep gently across the yard. The string lights she'd installed 3 summers ago still worked, flickering softly against the side of the shed. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Inbox. Subject: Cruise confirmation. Happy birthday, Evelyn. She opened it slowly. A final boarding notice. Suite 821, Glacier View, private balcony. Solo traveler, Ms. Evelyn A. Marks. She stared at the screen for a long time, not because she needed to process it, but because she finally could. She was going. Not as a caretaker, not as a placeholder, not as someone else's +1, just as herself. Her cruise confirmation email hits inbox. Last year, they celebrated a dog. This year, I celebrated dignity. Evelyn zipped the last compartment of her suitcase with a steady hand. It wasn't heavy, just a week's worth of soft knits, paperbacks, and her navy windbreaker with the deep inside pocket. She didn't bring anything she didn't love. She had spent too many years packing out of obligation, extra socks for others, aspirin for just-in-case headaches, chargers no one thanked her for remembering. This time, the only person she was planning for was herself. She tucked her passport into the outer sleeve, slipped her boarding documents into a manila envelope marked Trip 70, and took one last look around the house. It looked different now, not because it had changed, but because she had. There were still signs of lives that had passed through, fingerprints on the back door, a stain on the rug that would never quite lift. But they no longer spoke over her. They just existed, like chapters she had read and shelved. The locksmith had dropped off the final copy of her new keys that morning. She tested them once, locking the front door with a click that sounded like punctuation. Then she slid a sealed envelope into the drawer by the entryway, labeled in clean black ink, Janice. Open only if needed. Her train departed at noon. The cruise port was 2 cities south, the journey slow and scenic. She watched out the window as the familiar roads gave way to coastline, trees giving up their leaves, sky stretched wide above water. On board the ship, Evelyn's cabin was quiet and perfect. Not large, but enough. A queen bed pressed against a window that framed the sea like a painting. The kind of view people post with hashtags. She didn't take a photo. She just stood in front of the glass and let herself be still. Her first night at sea, she sat alone at dinner, by choice. The waiter was kind and never asked if she was expecting someone. The couple at the next table leaned in and whispered about her softly, assuming solitude was either tragedy or bravery. Evelyn let them. Some stories were richer for being misunderstood. From the gift shop, she bought 2 postcards, one with a glacier rendered in saturated blues, the other with a cartoon polar bear wearing sunglasses. She wrote the same sentence on both, "Wish you were here, but glad I am." One went to Allison, one to Janice. On the 3rd morning, she carried her tablet to the ship's library. It was too early for chatter. Most passengers were still asleep or waiting for coffee. She found a quiet table by the window and opened her legal documents. She wrote her final living testament not as an addendum, but as a love letter to herself. It was plain-spoken, typed in large print, saved under the file name E.M., signed, sealed, free. She included a final donation clause, a 5-figure gift to the senior legal aid clinic that had helped draft her trust. She'd included a note for the fund administrator, for the women who know, but are told not to speak. Make sure they're heard. Before she closed her tablet, she placed one final order. A custom bracelet, charm style, sterling silver. 3 links, etched with 3 words, signed, sealed, free. On the 5th day, she woke early to catch the sunrise. It was slow and unsubtle, pulling itself over the horizon like something stretching after a long sleep. Evelyn stepped out onto her private balcony, wrapped in her robe, coffee cupped between her palms. The ocean blinked in every direction. She laughed to herself softly as the sun warmed her face. "No bark days this time," she whispered. Back home, Janice stopped by to water the plants and collect the mail. She found the envelope in the drawer, just as Evelyn had planned. She opened it carefully and unfolded the note inside. "You're the executor now. I trust you'll know what to do, with everything that matters." Janice smiled and closed the drawer again. Outside, the wind picked up. The house didn't feel empty. It felt ready. Janice finds a note Evelyn left. "You're the executor now." They left a card on the counter. "I left a life they weren't invited to." The taxi pulled up to the curb just as the morning mist was beginning to lift. Evelyn stepped out, her bag light, her spine straighter than it had been in years. She paid in cash, tipped generously, and didn't wait for the receipt. The air smelled like it had rained overnight, clean and new. She stood at the gate for a moment before unlocking it. Not from hesitation, but from reverence. The house looked the same, but it felt different, as if it had been holding its breath and had finally exhaled the moment her foot touched the front step. She unlocked the door with her new key. No more shared codes, no more spare copies tucked under planters. Just her. Inside, the stillness was familiar, but this time it welcomed her. The thermostat had clicked on at just the right time. The light slanted across the wood floor the way it always did mid-morning. Her slippers were right where she'd left them, beside the bench she had refinished herself last spring. There were no balloons, no banners, no dog toys underfoot, just silence, and the scent of lemon balm from the diffuser she'd set before leaving. She unpacked slowly, her hands moving without hurry. Each drawer greeted its contents like old friends. Her charm bracelet went into the jewelry tray. Signed, sealed, free, glinting in the light. Later that afternoon, she hosted a tea. It wasn't on social media. There were no invitations, just quiet phone calls made before the cruise, and a kettle set to boil at 2:30 sharp. Janice arrived first, with shortbread and a scarf that didn't match but still worked. Allison came 10 minutes later, her arms full of zinnias wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. The 3 of them sat in the sunroom, surrounded by steam and the low murmur of conversation that doesn't fill silence but honors it. There were no candles, no songs, no pretense of celebration, just women who had shown up when it mattered and without being asked. They talked about little things, books, tomatoes, what it means to wake up and feel like your life is actually your own. Allison mentioned looking at office space for her new consulting project. Janice brought up the idea of renting a cabin together next fall. "I could drive," Evelyn offered. "I like the quiet highways now." They stayed until the light turned golden and soft, until the shadows on the wall grew long enough to mark the hour. When the door closed behind them, Evelyn poured herself one last cup of tea and took it to her office. She opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet and pulled out a fresh, blank copy of her living trust. This one wasn't for edits. This was archival. Final. She signed it with a pen that felt solid in her hand. The signature came out clean, full name, no tremor. The date below it marked not just the paperwork, but something larger. She clipped the pages together and placed them in a frame. It wasn't ornate, just a simple wood border, glass front, matte backing. She set it on the shelf above her desk, beside the photo Janice had taken on the porch, the one where all 3 of them were smiling like they knew something the world didn't. Then she opened the center drawer, reached to the back, and pulled out a folded card, the one with the pre-printed message and the scrawl on the inside. "Happy 70. We're busy today but love you. G+K." She stared at it for a moment, then she stood, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it into the trash without ceremony. No anger, no hesitation, just release. She rinsed her mug, dried it with a cloth, and set it in the rack. Outside, the sun dipped below the trees in a soft wave of orange. The string lights flickered on. Evelyn returned to the sunroom, settled into her chair, and folded the blanket over her lap. She didn't need applause. She didn't need forgiveness. She had something better: ownership, her house, her papers, her name, her ending. She leaned back, took a breath, and smiled to herself as the last light slid across the floor. They threw a party for their dog. I rewrote everything, without barking once. They threw a party for their dog. I rewrote everything, without barking once.